My husband checked his texts while I bled out. His mistress, wearing a stolen nurse's uniform, smirked from the doorway, waiting for me to die so they could pop the cork on a 1982 vintage. They thought my flatline meant they had won $50 million, but they forgot I designed their entire digital life. As my heart stopped, their execution began. My name is Morgan, and I was dying. The delivery room at St. Jude Private Hospital was a chaotic storm of shouting voices and blinding white lights, but I felt strangely detached, as if I were floating above my own body. Below me, the sheets were soaked in a terrifying amount of crimson. The hemorrhage was massive, a relentless tide taking my life with it. I could hear the panic in the voices of the junior nurses as my vitals crashed, the numbers on the monitors plummeting like stones dropped into a deep well. Through the haze of agony, I turned my head to find the man who had vowed to love me until death did us part. Preston stood in the far corner of the room, pressing his back against the wall as if afraid my blood might ruin his Italian loafers. He was not looking at me. He was not terrified. He was texting. His thumbs flew across the screen of his phone. His brow furrowed, not with grief, but with impatience. Look at him, I thought, the bitterness tasting worse than the bile in my throat. He looks like he is waiting for a delayed flight, not watching his wife bleed out. Just outside the open door, the shrill voice of my mother-in-law, Victoria Worthington, cut through the medical clamor. She was berating a young administrative assistant. "This is taking simply forever," Victoria snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "I have the Children's Fund Gala at 7 o'clock. If she does not hurry up and push, I am going to be late for the silent auction. Honestly, she is such a burden. Even giving birth is a drama with her." Shadows danced at the edge of my vision. I saw a figure lurking near the entrance of the VIP waiting area. It was a nurse, but the uniform was ill-fitting, the skirt hemmed too high for hospital regulations. It was Jade, my husband's mistress. She was peering into the room, her eyes wide, not with concern, but with a predatory anticipation. She was waiting for the confirmation of a death she had helped orchestrate. A sharp cramp ripped through my abdomen, triggering a sudden, lucid memory. 2 hours ago, the kitchen island. Jade had been there, smiling that sugar-coated smile of hers. "Here, Morgan, drink this," she had said, handing me a tall glass of fresh orange juice. "It has extra vitamin C, good for the baby. And for you." It had tasted bitter, metallic, like copper coins and almond extract. I had drunk it anyway because I wanted to believe they were human. I was wrong. "Doctor, her pressure is 60/40 and dropping," a frantic nurse yelled, her voice cracking. "Dr. Harrow, the specialist the Worthingtons had insisted I see, stood over me. He did not move with the urgency the situation demanded. His hands were slow, deliberate. He looked up, locking eyes with Preston across the room. He gave a microscopic nod. It was a signal. Let us wait a moment to see if it stabilizes," Dr. Harrow said, his voice calm, too calm for a slaughter. He was stalling. He was letting me die. I could not let them win. Not like this. I gathered every ounce of strength remaining in my freezing limbs. A nurse I did not recognize, a woman with kind eyes who was not part of Harrow's team, leaned in to wipe the sweat from my forehead. This was my only chance. I reached up, my bloody fingers fumbling, and grabbed her scrub top. I shoved the tiny, blood-smeared USB drive I had hidden in my palm into her pocket. "Take it," I wheezed, my voice a broken rattle. "Please. Hide it." She looked shocked, but her hand instinctively covered the pocket. She knew something was wrong. The darkness was heavy now. It crushed my chest. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor accelerated, faster, faster, until it merged into a single high-pitched tone that screamed through the room. Beep! The sound of the flatline filled the sterile air. Dr. Harrow checked his watch, feigning solemnity. Time of death, 4:42 p.m., he announced. My consciousness faded, but the scene shifted to the opulent VIP suite down the hall. The mourning period lasted exactly 3 seconds. Preston walked in, followed by Victoria. Jade was already there, the nurse's uniform discarded to reveal a designer cocktail dress she had worn underneath. Preston reached into the cooler and pulled out the bottle of Chateau Margaux, vintage 1982. Finally, Preston sighed, popping the cork with a festive sound. God, I thought she would never, go. To freedom, Jade giggled, clinking her glass against his. And to the baby, our baby now. And the trust fund, Victoria added, taking a long sip of the deep red wine. $50 million, finally secured. The architect is gone. The empire is safe from her low-class influence. They laughed, the sound ugly and distorted against the plush velvet furniture. But their toast was interrupted. The heavy oak doors swung open with a bang. Dr. Vance, the chief of medicine, stepped into the room. He was a tall man, imposing, with a face carved from granite. He was not smiling. He looked at the champagne, then at Preston, then at Jade. Dr. Vance. Preston smirked, swirling his wine. Here to offer condolences, save it. Dr. Vance stepped forward, his eyes burning with a righteous fury that chilled the room instantly. He took a breath, ready to deliver the words that would turn their victory into a nightmare. 5 years before the monitor screamed its flatline warning, I was not a victim. I was the lead data architect at Novatech, a woman who spoke the language of algorithms better than she spoke the language of love. I was independent, ambitious, and on the fast track to a directorship in our London branch. My life was a perfectly written code, free of bugs or errors. Then, Preston Worthington walked into my office. He was the heir to the Worthington Real Estate Group, a man who wore $5,000 suits but could not convert a PDF. He had come to Novatech for a consultation on digitalizing their archives, but he ended up courting me. He was charming, attentive, and seemingly helpless without my guidance. He made me feel needed in a way my computer screens never could. I fell for the illusion of the gentle prince, blind to the incompetence rotting beneath his smile. The first crack appeared the night he introduced me to his family. The Worthington estate was a cold, imposing mausoleum of old money. Victoria Worthington, draped in pearls that cost more than my college tuition, looked at me as if I were a stain on her Persian rug. Preston, she said, sipping her tea without offering me a cup. She is a lovely girl, I am sure, but she is an orphan, is she not? No family name, no connections. Darling, surely you can find someone with proper breeding. I stood up to leave, humiliated, but Preston grabbed my hand. He looked his mother in the eye, his jaw set in a performance of defiance that deserved an Oscar. I do not care about her background. Mother, Preston declared, squeezing my hand tight. I love her, and I will protect her. No matter what you say, that moment sealed my fate. I believed him. I turned down the promotion to London. I resigned from Novatech to become the dutiful wife he wanted. Our wedding was a spectacle of white roses and cold stares. Before the ceremony, his lawyer presented me with a prenuptial agreement thick enough to be a novel. The terms were brutal. If we divorced, I would walk away with $0. Nothing. Unless, the contract stated, there was irrefutable proof of his infidelity. It is just a formality. Babe, Preston had whispered, kissing my cheek. I would never cheat on you. Never. I signed it. The reality of our marriage was far from the fairy tale. Preston was a disastrous CEO. He made reckless investments that bled the company dry, night after night. While he slept, I sat in his study, rewriting his financial reports. I used my skills to hide $3 million in losses, covering up tax fraud that would have sent him to federal prison. I became his shadow architect, building the pedestal he stood on. Then came the miracle. After 3 years of negative tests and heartbreak, I was pregnant. When I showed Preston the 2 pink lines, his eyes lit up, but his joy was not for the life growing inside me. "Is it a boy?" he asked, grabbing my shoulders. "It has to be a boy. Morgan." Grandfather's trust fund only unlocks the full inheritance if the firstborn is a male heir. $50 million. Riding on this. To ensure a healthy pregnancy, Preston hired a private yoga instructor for me. Her name was Jade. She was the daughter of one of his shady business partners, a woman with a snake-like grace and eyes that lingered too long on my husband. "Breathe into the pain, Morgan," Jade would say, her voice silky as she adjusted my posture. "Just let go of the control." I tried to be friends with her, but the signs were there. Preston started coming home late, smelling of a mixture of cigar smoke and Chanel No. 5, a scent I never wore. I found charges on the supplementary credit card. I managed $2,000 for a diamond bracelet, $500 for a hotel suite in the city on a Tuesday afternoon. I wanted to confront him, but I was becoming strangely weak. It started as simple fatigue, but soon I was sleeping 14 hours a day. My memory became foggy. I would walk into a room and forget why I was there. "You are just tired, babe," Preston said one evening when I nearly collapsed at dinner. "Jade gave you that herbal tea? Right, drink it. It helps." "Really?" I looked at the tea, then at him. A cold shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning ran down my spine. I was not just tired. I was being erased. The fog in my brain lifted the moment I heard his voice through the heavy mahogany door. I was supposed to be asleep, sedated by the herbal tea Jade had lovingly prepared, but I had poured the toxic sludge into the potted ficus the moment she left the room. Preston was on the phone, pacing the hallway. Yes, the trust fund unlocks the moment the boy takes his first breath. Preston hissed into the receiver. "Do not worry. We will. Eliminate the obstacle after birth. She won't survive the delivery. Harrow has it covered." Obstacle. That was what he called me. Not wife. Not the mother of his child. Obstacle. Fear tried to seize my chest, a cold vice gripping my heart, but the data architect in me took over. Panic is a bug. Logic is the patch. I waited until 3 in the morning, when the house was silent save for the grandfather clock chiming downstairs. I crept into his study. My fingers, usually trembling lately from the drugs, were steady on the keyboard. I bypassed his pathetic password, his own birthday, and installed a kernel-level keylogger. I synced it to a remote server I had built years ago, a ghost drive he would never find. Accessing his secret cloud drive was child's play. The folders were neatly labeled, a testament to his arrogance. Inside a folder named Future, I found photos of him and Jade in Aspen, in Paris, and in our bed. They had already drafted wedding invitations for a date 1 month from today, but the financial folder was the kill shot. Or so I thought, until I opened the subdirectory labeled Scapegoat. My blood ran cold. Preston had embezzled $12 million from the Worthington Group, channeling it through shell accounts registered in my name. If I divorced him, or if I survived, I would not just be broke, I would go to federal prison for 20 years for corporate fraud. I dug deeper into his deleted emails. There it was, a receipt from a dark web marketplace for digoxin-based compounds, a heart rate inhibitor. The delivery address was Jade's apartment. It matched every symptom I had been suffering: the fatigue, the palpitations, the confusion. They were not just killing me, they were doing it slowly to mimic preeclampsia. I did not scream. I did not cry. I copied everything. I created 3 encrypted hard drives, One went via courier to my old family lawyer who hated the Worthingtons. One went anonymously to the cybercrime division. The third stayed taped to the inside of my thigh. I needed medical proof. I slipped out the next day, claiming I craved pickles from a specific deli in the city. Instead of going to the deli, I went to St. Mary's Hospital to see Dr. Vance, my late adoptive father's college roommate. Morgan, Dr. Vance said, his voice shaking as he looked at my blood work. You have traces of arsenic and digoxin in your system. We need to go to the police immediately. No, I stopped him, gripping his arm. If we go now, the Worthingtons will bury the evidence and bury me. I need them to think they have won. I have a plan, Dr. Vance. Call it the Phoenix Plan. For the next 2 weeks. I played the part of the dying swan perfectly. I stumbled. I complained of headaches. I let Jade feed me her poisoned soup, which I spit into napkins whenever she turned her back. Meanwhile, on my encrypted tablet, I liquidated my personal savings and my grandmother's jewelry inheritance, converting $200,000 into untraceable cryptocurrency. The night before my due date, Preston came into the bedroom. He held a document, his face a mask of false concern. It is just to protect the baby's assets. Babe, he lied, his eyes shifting away from mine. Sign this, and we can focus on the birth. It was a divorce filing, stripping me of all parental rights and financial claims. If I signed, he got full custody immediately. Okay, Preston, I whispered weakly, feigning exhaustion. Whatever you say. I took the pen he offered, but under the sheet. I switched it with the one in my pocket, a novelty pen I had bought online that used ink designed to vanish completely after 24 hours. I signed my death warrant, knowing that by tomorrow, the paper would be blank. Thank you, Morgan, he said, snatching the paper away. You did the right thing, I know. I replied, closing my eyes. He left the room, victorious. He had no idea he had just walked into a trap that would snap his neck. The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Jade appeared in my kitchen, a glass of vibrant orange juice in her hand. She wore a sympathetic smile that did not reach her cold, calculating eyes. Here, darling, Jade cooed, placing the glass on the counter. It has extra folate. It will give you strength for the delivery. I knew this was the final dose. The lethal one. As she turned to grab her purse, I poured the liquid into the sink drain and held the empty glass to my lips, feigning a swallow. Delicious, I lied, wiping my mouth. Good, she whispered, her voice dropping an octave. So good for you. 30 minutes later, my water broke. The ride to St. Jude Private Hospital was a study in cruelty. I gripped the leather handle of the car, breathing through waves of agonizing contractions. Preston did not offer a hand. He did not offer a word of comfort. He was on the phone with his lawyer. Yes, the papers must be ready by noon. Preston barked into his headset. The moment the cord is cut, the trust fund transfers. I want no delays. Is the $50 million secured? Good. At the hospital. Doctor, Harrow met us at the entrance. He did not wheel me to a regular delivery room, but to a secluded operating theater at the end of the hall. He prepared a syringe that looked different from the standard epidural. This will help you relax, Morgan, Harrow said, his eyes avoiding mine. He injected it. Within seconds, a terrifying coldness washed over me. It was not pain relief. It was a paralytic. My arms went heavy, then my legs. I tried to speak, to scream that something was wrong, but my tongue felt like lead. I was fully conscious, feeling every contraction, but utterly unable to move or make a sound. I was a prisoner in my own flesh. From the hallway, through the thin walls of the prep room, I heard Victoria's voice. Is she dead yet? My mother-in-law asked, loud enough for me to hear. I have a dress fitting at 3 o'clock. This is so inconvenient. The pain of the birth was a white-hot fire, magnified by my inability to scream. When I finally felt the release of pressure, a sharp, healthy cry filled the room. My son, my baby boy. I strained my eyes, desperate to see him. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to smell him. "It is a boy," Harrow announced flatly. Preston stepped forward. He did not look at me. He picked up the crying infant, wrapped him in a blanket, and turned his back. "Give him to me." I tried to scream, but only a silent tear escaped my eye. Preston walked to the door where Jade was waiting. "Here he is," Preston said, handing my son to his mistress. "He is perfect." "Hello, my son," Jade whispered, looking at the baby with a possessive glint. "Mommy is here now. They took him away. They stole my child while I lay paralyzed on the table." Harrow returned to my side. He checked the monitors, then reached for the life support controls. "Now for the finale," he muttered. He began to switch off the oxygen flow and manipulate the IV drip to simulate a massive hemorrhage. But he did not know that Dr. Vance had hacked the internal surveillance system. Every dial Harrow turned, every protocol he breached, was being recorded on a secure server in the basement. I closed my eyes and focused, an hour before leaving the house. I had swallowed the pill Dr. Vance had given me, a beta-blocker derivative derived from pufferfish toxin, designed to lower the heart rate to near undetectable levels. It was kicking in. The darkness was real now. Beep! The monitor flatlined. The green line went straight. "Time of death, 12:45 p.m., Harrow stated. Preston rushed back into the room. He looked at my still body, and for a second, I thought I saw regret. Then he opened his mouth. "Oh, God, Morgan," he wailed, a theatrical performance that would have embarrassed an amateur actor. He paused. Then his voice turned ice cold. "She must have poisoned herself. I want her cremated immediately. Today. Do not let the coroner touch her. I cannot bear the thought of an autopsy." "Understood, Mr. Worthington." Harrow nodded. "I will sign the release for immediate cremation." They zipped me into a black bag. The darkness was absolute. I felt the gurney moving, the wheels rattling over the linoleum floor. Down. We were going down. The air grew colder. The smell of antiseptic was replaced by the smell of formaldehyde. The zipper hissed open. Welcome back to the land of the living. "Morgan," a familiar voice whispered. It was Dr. Vance. I was in the morgue, and the game had just begun. While my body lay cooling on a stainless steel table in the morgue, undergoing a resurrection that defied medical norms, a celebration was erupting 2 floors above in the VIP suite. I watched the recording later, every pixel burning into my memory, fueling the fire that would soon consume them all. The room did not smell of death or grief. It smelled of expensive leather and the cork of a 1982 vintage wine. Victoria Worthington was beaming, her face flushed with the kind of joy most grandmothers reserve for weddings, not the day of their daughter-in-law's death. She patted Jade's hand, looking at the mistress with unmasked adoration. "You, my dear, are the future of this family," Victoria gushed, clinking her glass against Jade's. "Finally, a woman who understands our stature. You are simply the perfect daughter-in-law." Preston was pacing the room, but his stride was light, almost dancing. He held up a document, waving it like a trophy. "Do you know what this paper means?" Preston asked, his voice booming with arrogance. "It means the trust fund is unlocked. $50 million. It is officially ours. The moment that Brat took a breath and Morgan took her last, the money transferred, $50 million. It is overwhelming." Jade sighed, feigning modesty before pulling out her phone. She adjusted her hair, checked her lighting, and hit the record button. Her face instantly transformed from gloating triumph to a mask of tragic sorrow. "Hey guys," Jade whispered into the camera. a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. I have devastating news. My best friend, my sister. Morgan didn't make it. Please pray for the family. We are just broken. As soon as she ended the stream, the smile snapped back onto her face like a rubber band. That should get us about 10,000 likes and plenty of sympathy, she said, tossing the phone onto the sofa. The family lawyer, a weasel of a man named Mr. Sterling, entered the room with a stack of files. The custody papers are ready, Mr. Worthington, Sterling said, and the transfer of assets. We just need to handle the public relations aspect regarding the late Mrs. Worthington. Erase her, Preston commanded, uncapping his gold pen. We are changing the baby's name. Morgan wanted to call him Leo. Ridiculous. He will be Preston III, and leak a story to the press tomorrow. Say she was unstable. Say she was an addict. Make people believe her death was her own fault. I want her memory to be so toxic that no one asks questions. A brilliant strategy. Victoria agreed, sipping her wine. She was an unfortunate accident, but a necessary one for the prosperity of this family. A low-class girl who served her biological purpose and expired. Preston pulled out his phone again. Dialing the chairman of the board. Yes, it is done. He told the person on the other end, I will be taking the CEO position officially tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The obstacle is gone. They raised their glasses high, the crystal catching the light. To the Worthington Empire, they chorused. They had no idea. They were so drunk on their own victory that they did not notice the large flat-screen television on the wall of the hospital lobby was not playing the news. It was playing them, and the feed was not just in the lobby. It was being broadcast directly to the local police precinct's dispatch center. Down in the nurse's station. The young nurse I had grabbed in the delivery room had followed my dying wish. She had plugged the bloody USB drive into the hospital's main announcement system. The file I had named Confession was queued and ready. The heavy door to the VIP suite swung open. The laughter died in their throats. Dr. Vance stood in the doorway. He was not wearing his surgical mask. He was not looking at the floor in somber respect. He was looking straight at Preston, and on his face was a smile that was colder than the corpse they thought I was. Dr. Vance, Preston stammered, lowering his glass. Is there a problem with the cremation paperwork, Dr. Vance stepped into the room, the sound of his footsteps heavy and final. No problem at all. Mr. Worthington? Doctor, Vance said, his voice low and dangerous. I just thought you should know that the show is about to start. Doctor, Vance stood in the center of the plush carpet, an island of calm in a sea of premature celebration. He looked from the open bottle of wine to the flushed faces of my murderers. I am sorry to interrupt the festivities, Vance said, his voice smooth but lacking any warmth. Preston scoffed, swirling the last dregs of the 1982 vintage in his glass. He looked at the doctor with the annoyance of a man forced to deal with the help. Where is the death certificate? Preston demanded, stepping forward. Why are you still standing here? Go sign the papers so we can leave. This place is depressing. Dr. Vance slowly peeled off his latex gloves, one finger at a time. He dropped them onto the pristine white tablecloth next to the hors d'oeuvres. He took a step closer to my husband, invading his personal space in a way that made Preston flinch. I cannot sign a death certificate, Preston, Vance said softly, because this is not a medical consultation anymore. What are you talking about? Preston snapped. If it is not medical, what is it? Vance leaned in, his eyes locking onto Preston's dilated pupils. The room went silent. It's a police operation, Vance whispered. The silence that followed was absolute, shattered a second later by the sound of crystal hitting the floor. Victoria's hand had gone limp. Her wine glass smashed against the hardwood, sending shards of glass and red wine exploding across the room like blood spatter. Jade's smile, which had been plastered on her face for her social media fans, froze into a grotesque rictus of terror. Preston laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "Because it is not? Funny." "It is certainly not a joke. Mr. Worthington!" A deep voice boomed from the hallway. The district police chief marched into the room, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. In his hand, he held a stack of papers that were definitely not sympathy cards. They were arrest warrants. "Preston Worthington, Jade Miller, Victoria Worthington," the chief announced. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and embezzlement." "Arrest?" Preston screamed, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "Arrest who for what? My wife died of natural causes. It was a medical accident. She had complications." The chief did not argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder, my recorder. He pressed a button. The audio was crisp and clear, amplified by the silence of the room. It was Preston's voice. How much of the digoxin should she take the recording played? Then Jade's voice, sweet and poisonous. Enough to stop her heart, but slowly. "It has to look like natural heart failure. Harrow said 2 doses will do it." Jade let out a strangled gasp. She lunged toward the sofa where her phone lay, desperate to delete the messages, the photos, the evidence of her guilt. But she was too slow. One of the officers intercepted her, spinning her around and slamming her against the wall. The metallic click-click of handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "Get off me!" Jade shrieked. "It was him! It was all Preston. He made me!" "Do it! You lying witch!" Preston roared, turning on her. "Silence!" Victoria yelled, stepping in front of the police chief. She drew herself up to her full height, trying to summon the authority of her ancestors. "This is slander, absolute slander. Do you have any idea who we are? We are the Worthingtons. I will have your badge for this. I will sue this entire department for harassment." Dr. Vance did not speak. He simply raised his arm and pointed a steady finger at the large television mounted on the wall above the fireplace. "I think you should watch the news, Victoria," Vance said. The screen flickered. It was a live feed from the operating theater down the hall, but instead of a grieving medical team, the image showed Dr. Harrow. He was not wearing his surgical gown. He was in his shirt sleeves, and his hands were cuffed behind his back. A detective was holding a microphone to his face. "I will talk," Harrow was blubbering on the screen, sweat pouring down his face. "I will tell you everything Preston Worthington paid me, $50,000 to delay the C-section. He told me to let her bleed. I have the text messages. I have the bank transfers. Do not put me in with the general population. Please." Victoria stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The invincible shield of the Worthington name had just been shattered by a cowardly doctor trying to save his own skin. Preston looked from the TV to the police, his world collapsing in real time. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, this is impossible. She is dead. She cannot hurt me." "Oh, she is just getting started," the police chief said, grabbing Preston's arm. They were finished, but the final nail in the coffin had not even arrived yet. The door was about to open one last time. The heavy oak doors of the VIP suite groaned as they were pushed open to their limit. This was my entrance. I did not walk in. A nurse pushed me in a wheelchair, my hospital gown stark white against the dark wood. My face was pale, my lips cracked from dehydration, and my body felt like it had been run over by a truck. But my eyes were alive. They were burning with a fire that could consume this entire building. Preston, who was still trembling from the police chief's announcement, turned to look. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a wax figure. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the Persian rug, scrambling backward on his hands and feet until he hit the legs of the sofa. "You!" Preston stammered, his eyes bulging. You are dead." I saw the line go flat. "You are a ghost." I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. Pain shot through my abdomen, but I ignored it, slowly, deliberately. I pushed myself up. I stood on my own 2 feet, shaky but unyielding. "I have been dead. Preston," I said, my voice raspy but echoing with steel. I was dead long enough to see the true faces of everyone in this room, and I came back to life just in time to send you all to hell. I reached into the side of the wheelchair and pulled out a thick stack of documents, the real audit reports I had compiled in secret. I threw them onto the coffee table. They landed with a heavy thud right next to the spilled wine. "That is the forensic audit of the Worthington Group," I declared, looking at the police chief. "It details how my husband embezzled $12 million and laundered it through a shell company owned by Jade's father. Every cent is tracked. Every signature is verified." Preston shook his head. "Desperate. She is lying. She is my ex-wife. She has no standing here. I have the divorce papers. I have full custody," he screamed, fumbling for the folder on the table. "Open it," I challenged him. He ripped the folder open. He stared at the signature line on the bottom of the page. It was blank, pristine white paper. Where is it?" He gasped. "I saw her sign it. You saw me sign it with disappearing ink." "Preston," I explained, allowing a cold smile to touch my lips. "The ink vanishes after 24 hours. Legally, that document never existed. I am still your lawful wife. I own 50% of your shares. And I am the sole legal guardian of my son." Jade let out a high-pitched wail. I turned my attention to the television screen where Dr. Vance had queued up the next file. "And just in case the embezzlement is not enough," I said, "here is the main event." The video played. It was grainy but clear enough. It showed Jade in my kitchen, pulling a vial from her purse and dripping a clear liquid into my orange juice. That was yesterday morning. I told the room. Attempted murder. Victoria Worthington lost her mind. She let out a feral scream and lunged at me, her manicured claws aiming for my face. "You gutter trash!" Victoria shrieked. "You ruined everything." 2 officers intercepted her before she could get within 5 feet of me. They twisted her arms behind her back. I stepped forward, bringing my face inches from hers. "You always wanted a high-class daughter-in-law, didn't you?" "Victoria," I whispered into her ear. "Well, congratulations." "You finally have a daughter-in-law powerful enough to put you in federal prison. Is that classy enough for you?" Jade collapsed onto the floor, grabbing the leg of the police chief's pants. Please, listen to me," Jade sobbed, snot running down her face, her glamour completely gone. "It was Preston. He made me do it. He said he would kill me if I didn't help him. I am a victim here." Preston looked at his mistress with pure revulsion. "You traitorous cow," he spat. "Dr." Vance stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "The toxicology report is finished," Vance announced to the police. "Morgan's blood shows high concentrations of arsenic accumulated over 6 months. It is consistent with slow poisoning. This is attempted murder in the 1st degree." The room was filled with the sounds of Miranda rights being read. I turned to the social worker who had entered with the police. "Take my son," I commanded, my voice breaking for the first time. "Take him to the secure ward. Do not let any member of the Worthington family within 500 feet of him. If they try, have them arrested." I watched as they were handcuffed, one by one. The empire was not just crumbling, it was being demolished. The destruction of the Worthington dynasty did not happen over weeks or months. Because I had automated the entire process, it happened in milliseconds. Before Preston was even shoved into the back of the police cruiser, The story was trending #1 globally on every social media platform. My dead man's switch, a programmed email blast set to trigger if I didn't enter a safety code every 12 hours, had executed perfectly. Headlines screamed across the internet. Real estate heir and mother plot murder of pregnant wife. The evidence files I had attached the audio recordings, the altered financial logs. The photos of Jade and Preston were now public domain. I sat in a private recovery room, watching the financial news network on the television. It was a bloodbath. The Worthington Group stock was in freefall, the graph looking like a cliff edge. Trading has been halted for Worthington Real Estate, the news anchor announced, looking stunned. Share value has dropped by 60% in 40 minutes. Major investors are pulling out en masse. I looked down at my phone and opened a terminal app. I had one last button to press. It was a script I had named The Audit. With a single tap, I forwarded 5 years of the real, unadulterated financial records directly to the servers of the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. Enjoy the audit. Preston, I whispered to the empty room. Down in the lobby. The scene was chaotic. I could hear the commotion even from the second floor. Victoria was screaming at a police officer who had just informed her that her platinum credit cards had been declined for her bail bond. "What do you mean, declined?" Victoria screeched. "I have a limit of $500,000. Your assets have been frozen by the federal government, ma'am," the officer replied dryly. "RICO statutes. You do not have a dime to your name right now." At the same time, a breaking news alert flashed on the screen. A SWAT team had raided the penthouse of Jade's father. The headline read, "Prominent developer arrested in connection with massive money laundering scheme linked to Worthington Group." I had exposed the shell companies. The house of cards had collapsed, taking every single player down with it. The mansion, their cars, their summer homes in the Hamptons, everything was being seized and sealed with yellow police tape. I walked to the window, holding my son. He was sleeping, blissfully unaware that his mother had just burned down the world to keep him warm. Below, in the parking lot, the paparazzi had swarmed. They captured the moment Preston was dragged out of the hospital. He looked nothing like the arrogant prince he had been an hour ago. His shirt was torn, his hair wild. He spotted me standing in the window. "Morgan," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Morgan, tell them it is a mistake. I am your husband, Morgan." I did not wave. I did not frown. I simply stared at him with the indifference of a statue until they shoved his head down and forced him into the car. Jade fared no better. My phone was blowing up with notifications from her social media accounts. Her loyal fans had turned into a lynch mob. The comments were brutal. "Murderer. Rot in hell. I hope you suffer." Every brand deal she had the yoga apparel. The organic supplements posted immediate statements terminating their contracts. She was not just arrested, she was socially annihilated. A soft knock on the door drew my attention away from the carnage outside. It was Dr. Vance. He walked in quietly, closing the door behind him to shut out the noise of the ending empire. He held a large manila envelope in his hands. "It is over. Morgan." "Doctor," Vance said gently. "They are gone. You are safe." I looked down at the tiny bundle in my arms. "We are safe." "Doctor," Vance cleared his throat, his expression turning serious. He held out the envelope. "There is one last thing," he said. "The DNA results you asked for. I ran them against Preston's sample on file and the donor registry." I took the envelope. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the anticipation of the final truth. This was the secret that would turn their tragedy into a farce. "Thank you, Uncle Vance," I whispered. I looked at the seal. It was time to know for sure. 1 week later, the circus moved from the hospital to the family court. Preston had managed to scrape together bail money by leveraging his last remaining unseized asset, a vintage car collection he had hidden in his friend's garage. He and Victoria sat on the plaintiff's side, looking like ghosts of their former selves. Victoria wore a suit that was clearly a season old, and Preston looked as if he hadn't slept in 7 days. They were desperate. They knew the criminal charges were solid, so their only hope of accessing the family trust fund and the legal defense money it could provide was to secure custody of my son. Your Honor, their lawyer, a court-appointed public defender because their high-priced firm had dropped them, stammered. The mother is clearly unstable. She faked her own death. She orchestrated a media circus. This environment is toxic for the child. The Worthington family requests immediate temporary custody of the heir. Heir. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. They still thought this was about a dynasty. I sat quietly next to my lawyer. I was not wearing hospital scrubs today. I wore a tailored navy blue suit, my hair pulled back in a sharp bun. I looked like the CEO of my own life. When the judge asked if I had a rebuttal, I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue about my mental health. I simply walked to the bench and placed a single sheet of paper on the polished wood. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady. Before we discuss custody, we must establish paternity. This is a DNA test conducted by the state laboratory 3 days ago. The judge adjusted his glasses and read the document. His eyebrows shot up. He handed the paper to Preston's lawyer, who read it and turned pale. Preston snatched the paper from his lawyer's hands. What is this? Preston snapped. He scanned the page, then he froze. His eyes stopped blinking. Excluded, Preston whispered, his voice trembling. Probability of paternity. 0%. This is a mistake. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The few reporters allowed in the back row began typing furiously on their phones. It is no mistake, Preston, I said, turning to face him. You are not the father. You cheated on me, Preston screamed, standing up and knocking his chair over. You whore, I knew it. Sit down, the bailiff shouted. I did not cheat, I replied calmly. I simply solved a problem you were too arrogant to acknowledge. You are sterile, Preston. You have been sterile since college. All those years of abusing steroids and party drugs destroyed your count. I found out 3 years ago when I analyzed your medical records from your brief rehab stint in Switzerland. Preston stood there, mouth agape, looking like a fish pulled onto a dock. But you were pregnant, he stuttered. We tried. I thought. You thought what? I asked, cutting him off. You never came to a single fertility appointment? You never asked to see the scan results. You just assumed that because you are a Worthington, your biology must be superior. It isn't. I wanted a child. You couldn't give me one, so I went to a sperm bank. I paid for the IVF with my own bonuses. I selected a donor who was everything you are not: intelligent, kind, and healthy. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had plotted to kill his wife. He had destroyed his life. He was facing life in prison, and it was all for a child who did not share a single drop of his blood. The trust fund, the $50 million that required a blood heir, was gone forever. Next to him, Victoria let out a sound that was not human. It was a strangled, gurgling cry. Her face, already pale, turned a terrifying shade of gray. The revelation that her noble lineage had ended and that she had been fighting for a mongrel child was too much for her fragile heart. My legacy, Victoria gasped, clutching her chest. She collapsed sideways, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Mom! Preston shouted, but he didn't move to help her. He just stared at me with pure horror. Order, order in the court, the judge yelled, banging his gavel. Medic! As the paramedics rushed in to attend to the twitching form of Victoria Worthington, the judge looked at Preston with undisguised disgust. In light of this evidence, the judge declared, his voice cutting through the commotion, and considering the criminal charges pending against the plaintiff, I am dismissing this petition with prejudice. Ms. Morgan retains full sole legal and physical custody. Mr. Worthington, you have no rights to this child. You are a stranger to him. I looked at Preston one last time. He was alone, broke, and unrelated to the only leverage he thought he had. Goodbye, Preston, I said softly. I turned my back on the chaos and walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking a rhythm of absolute victory on the marble floor. The moment the judge declared Preston a legal stranger to my son, the last thread of his sanity snapped. He did not look like a businessman anymore. He looked like a rabid animal trapped in a corner. You stole everything from me, Preston screamed, his voice shredding the dignified silence of the courtroom. He vaulted over the defense table, ignoring his unconscious mother on the floor. He charged at me, his hands curled into claws, desperate to hurt the woman who had outsmarted him at every turn. But I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply watched him come. Before he could get within striking distance, two large men in dark suits, my private security detail, intercepted him. One of them, a former linebacker, tackled Preston to the ground with a bone-crushing thud. Get off me, I am. I am a Worthington, Preston howled, spitting at the polished floor. The judge was standing, banging his gavel with furious force. Bail is revoked immediately, the judge bellowed. Officers, take him into custody. I am adding assault and contempt of court to his charges. Preston was dragged away, his expensive suit tearing at the seams, kicking and screaming like the spoiled child he had always been. That was the last time he ever saw the outside world as a free man. The district attorney did not offer a plea deal. With the mountain of evidence I had provided, Preston was convicted on all counts conspiracy to commit murder, embezzlement, and fraud. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jade fared no better. Her tears and claims of being a victim fell on deaf ears. The jury saw the video of her poisoning my drink. She was sentenced to 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The Worthington empire crumbled faster than a sandcastle in a tsunami. Following the scandal, the board of directors declared bankruptcy. In a twist of poetic justice that I savored like fine wine, Novatech, the company I had left to marry Preston, bought the Worthington Group's assets for pennies on the dollar. The arrogant legacy Victoria had tried to protect was now just a subsidiary of the tech giant she had once looked down upon. I did not want their blood money. I put the Worthington estate, the mansion that had been my prison, up for auction. It sold for $12 million. I took every single cent and established the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal aid and safe housing for women escaping domestic abuse. On the day the adoption papers were finalized, I stood on the steps of the courthouse. The press was there, a sea of cameras and microphones. They wanted a statement from the tragic widow. I gave them a smile instead. My son's name is Leo. I told the reporters, my voice clear and strong. Leo Vance. He carries my name now. The Worthington name ends here. I walked through the crowd, not with my head down, but with my chin held high, shielding my son's face from the flashbulbs. Later that afternoon, I drove to the quiet cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The autumn leaves were turning gold and red. I walked to the simple headstone where my parents rested. The wind was cool, biting at my cheeks, but I felt warm. I adjusted the blanket around Leo, who was cooing softly in my arms. We made it. Mom, Dad, I whispered. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the final court order, the paper that granted me absolute freedom. I placed it on the grave, weighted down by a small white stone. Standing a few yards away, near the old oak tree, was Dr. Vance. He did not approach. He just watched over us, as he always had. He offered me a small, proud smile and a slow nod. I nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of the debt I could never repay. I turned away from the graves and walked toward my car. It was a sleek, black sedan that I had bought with my own money, earned from my consulting work with the police cyber division. I opened the door and strapped Leo into his car seat. I got into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. There was no chauffeur, no husband telling me where to go, no mother-in-law criticizing my driving. There was just the open road. As I started the engine and pulled away, watching the cemetery fade in the rearview mirror, a single thought echoed in my mind. They wanted to bury me, but they forgot that I was a seed. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Morgan's Revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.